1. About 2 weeks ago, we decided to go to the coast because we had a Friday off from our classes in university, and decided to hike and camp out for the weekend. We had a 3-day plan to stay in 3 different towns and hike to each place. This story is about the first place we stayed in. The first town was barely a town. It was more like a bunch of small houses and farmlands and very few people. It was off-season, so normally there would be some tourists there since the main attraction is a huge abandoned city left over from the times of the ancient Greek civilization. Anyway, since there were 5 or 6 camping grounds available, one of which was highly recommended on TripAdvisor and the likes of, we didn't bother calling beforehand. We simply headed there and then straight for that camping area. Upon reaching it, we saw the gate open. Not really so unusual, but when we entered it, no one seemed to be there. We knocked and called out for someone and no one responded. Except the outdoor bar was all open, with expensive bottles of alcohol lined up and food left on the kitchen table, as we saw from the window, so they couldn't have gone far. My boyfriend found it a bit strange. They would leave everything open like that. But assuming it was a small community with no crime, we didn't think more. We went to some other camping grounds to ask if they were open. The first one we went to said they were closed because their grounds were very messy these days, but they recommended us another place. We asked them about the first ground we had went to, and strangely, the man said don't go there. When we asked why, he said, just don't. I don't really recommend you going there. Anyway, the other place he told us about was also closed, and luckily, in the meantime, I found a signboard for the first place, and it had their number on it. We called them, and a man picked up and told us that he and his wife, who run the place, are out for a couple of hours, but we will be back by the evening. He said we could set up our camp, and that we would meet later. The place was a bit secluded, but it was quite picturesque, and we set our camp and left. We spent the whole day exploring and hiking around, and after a tiring day around 10 p.m., after dinner started heading back. This is where things got extra creepy. When we got back, we found the place still empty. No one had returned, and it was quite late. My boyfriend called up the owners again, and they said they had decided not to return tonight, but we could leave the money under a table mat by the bar. They said the kitchen and bathrooms are open if we need to use them. The place was dark, and the yard where we had set the camp up was huge and without lighting. My boyfriend immediately started to feel a bit uneasy. He was concerned why 2 business owners would leave their property completely open to 2 total strangers, with a bar full of unopened bottles and a half-open house. As we walked towards our camp, he kept subtly expressing his uneasiness and kept looking around. He's usually pretty calm, so I told him if he's really feeling so strongly about this, we can just go to the pension where we had dinner earlier and stay the night there in a hotel room. He opened the flashlight of his phone and kept looking around, getting more and more uneasy. We agreed to pack up our camp and leave. I began to pack it up since it requires a lot of folding, and he was already anxious. I told him to just stand and give me light as I pack it up. Except, constantly he would move the light and check the area, and I kept getting irritated because I could sense his worry, and at the same time I couldn't pack fast enough because I couldn't see. At one point, he even told me in a slightly bitchy way to hurry it up, and as soon as I folded the camp, we stuffed it into its bag and hurriedly packed our shit and scooted. He still seemed super anxious, and I told him to relax. Just telling this part gives me chills all over again. The road back to the main area of town was dark and lonely, and this is where he told me. There's something I wanted to say, but not while we were still in the grounds. Well, what is it? I asked. He hesitated. Then he said he didn't want to freak me out, but he was sure that he saw someone lurking in the dark, behind the wooden cabins and by the bathrooms, twice. No one was supposed to be there except us. I got the chills, but I still tried to rationalize, saying it's a farm area. There's lots of animals, maybe a cat moving around. But he was adamant it was a human figure, walking like a human would and standing. That is why he kept checking and wanted to hurry so much. And that's why he was telling me to hush up and keep my voice down. I almost had tears in my eyes at this point, and the hair on my back was standing. I kept looking back and almost running at this point to the lighted area of the quiet town, and only really relaxed when we reached the pension and booked a room there, got the key, locked, and checked it twice. I am generally a skeptical person, but I really do believe my boyfriend didn't just see things. I don't know who that was back there or what could have happened, if anything, and I don't care to know. Dark and isolated places have always creeped me out anyway. Person lurking in the dark. Let's never, ever meet. 2. I just remembered this, and it hit me how much we must have terrified some guy. Or something, I have no idea. I was 16, so this would have been 1995. Before the day when most people had cell phones. A friend of mine had gotten a car, and I didn't drive. I still don't. We went out and drove. A lot. We'd go, look at that radio tower way up on that hill. Let's go find it. Or let's drive 3 towns over and cruise around. A main freeway we used often tended to attract some really jerky drivers. We'd get cut off, tailgated, etc. Pretty regularly by guys with brass balls. One day, we were coming back from some adventure at maybe 11 p.m. Had another friend with us, and we all decided that we'd bug the heck out of the next guy who made an assholish move at us. Some guy in a big-ass pickup eventually pulled up on our tail. Speed limit was 65, we were doing 70. He tailgated us for about a mile, and we sped up to 75, but he finally honked, zoomed around us and cut us off with a foot at most to spare. We looked as he passed, and he was a big guy. He gets in front of us and, to our annoyance, now he's just doing 75 too. It wasn't like he was demanding that we go faster. So when he changed lanes, my friend did so too. After a bit, he made another lane change, and we matched. Then I suppose, to see if it was just his imagination, he slid smoothly over 3 lanes, and we followed. We thought it was funny, bugging this big jerk in his big vehicle. He exits on a cloverleaf onto a different freeway, and we follow. He drives that for maybe 2 or 3 miles, and though we kept at least 3 car lengths behind him and us, we kept up his approximate 75 miles per hour and changed lanes whenever he did. He exits onto another cloverleaf. We meet him headed north. Then he went west, and now he was going south on a major road, not a freeway, but 3 lanes each direction. Speed limit was more like 40, and we changed lanes with him, but kept a distance. He drove on this road for about 15 miles or so. This road passing through both commercial, residential, and mostly rural areas. When he stops at the occasional light, we keep our distance. Finally, Mr. Big Pickup takes a right turn onto a smaller road, out of a commercial zone into residential. We turn. He's rolling down at maybe 25, 30, and he suddenly takes a sharp left onto a narrow residential street. We had to really crank it to turn. This little neighborhood had lots of dead ends, oddly turning sections of street, and other assorted ways to get lost. And the truck driver speeds up and starts doing evasive maneuvers. Only one problem. The other friend with us lived in that neighborhood previously, so he's going, "Sharp left at the red car. There's a hidden right up there. If he takes it, yeah, hard right. No, dead end. He went hard left, not soft left." or something like that. And we're keeping up with his every move. He hops onto a back road which goes a long distance north-south, and we follow him north about 15 miles. He takes a few other detours in a small commercial area, where the driver used to work. So again, we're right along with him. Back on the main road, we keep going, and when he reaches an entrance onto the freeway, noted near the beginning, the one after the first cloverleaf, here he was hopping on and heading east. We let him go. Considering his build, I think it was less likely that we scared him, and more so that he could have reversed, bashed into us, and crushed the little 4-door Mazda we had, and come back to treat us to a tire iron massage. We were young and stupid. We looked back on this for a long time and laughed, but with the knowledge that it's possible we either scared a guy shitless or narrowly escaped being attacked. Either way, I doubt he tailgated anyone after that. 3. Just to give you some background, I live in a small coastal community in Florida. It's not a bad town by any means, but there's a lot of drug use and drunks and homeless and rich people all crowded together on an island. Let's just say there's an active police presence at all times. My family, my mom, my dad, and myself, moved down from New Jersey before I started kindergarten. So I've grown up here my whole life, and I'm an only child. We've always lived in the same house, but it's not exactly a house. It's more like a triplex of apartments, each one with their own one-car garage that share the rather big driveway. And we live in the one farthest from the road, separated from the other two by a small room for the washing machine that the 3 units share. We all have our own dryers. And just for an added fact, we've lived here longer than the landlord has owned the property, so he kinda just comes to us if there's something going on. I'm 21 now, but when I was 13, I had to walk down said street to get home from my bus stop every day. My mom isn't very strict, and never really has been, except when it came to me staying home alone and getting my ears pierced. I don't know if this is accurate or not, but she'd always led me to believe it was illegal for her to let me stay home by myself until she got home from work. Up until I became of age, I'd been stuck in after-school daycare, staying there from when school ended until 6 p.m. when my mom came to pick me up. It went on like this for years, and when the end of 6th grade came, I was so fucking glad to get out of there. Back then, the first apartment was empty, vacant, and had been for a while. But 3, maybe 4 months before this incident took place, a guy had moved into Unit 2. The first time I talked to him was when I was getting the mail. I think I was expecting something I'd ordered online or whatever. But he stopped me to say hello as I walked down to the mailboxes at the end of the driveway, and I swear to God that he told me his name was Mike. I didn't think much of it at the time, smiled and whatever, got my mail and went about my business. On this day, I had got off the bus and started walking. There were a few other kids that got off at my stop, but they lived on the next street over, and so, just like I had done for most of the school year, I walked the edge of the road down to my driveway by myself. There's no sidewalk until the house after mine. Usually this is where I would stop and grab the mail, but on this day, I noticed that my neighbor had his beat-up car pulled out of his garage. It was running, and he was frantically talking to someone on a cell phone and pacing the length of it. But the thing that stood out to me the most was the thing in the front passenger seat of his shitty 4-door. I think it's a Jeep, but I don't know, I'll explain later. I couldn't make out what he was saying, but I thought I was sly, and just acted like I was rooting around in my mailbox as I watched him, because there were red flags all over the place, and my mind was screaming to run and lock myself inside my house. 1. I had never seen this guy on a cell phone before. I had assumed he couldn't afford one because Dude has tinfoil on his windows, so he doesn't have to use the air conditioning. And goes fishing at the beach every day for food. 2. While I've seen his car before, I've never actually seen him drive it. It's always in the garage, and whenever he'd go anywhere, it was always on a bike. We were pretty much within walking distance from everything, both Walmart and Walgreens, McDonald's, the beach, literally everything. It's not uncommon for people to primarily use bikes to get around town, but since our town is on a barrier island, you have to cross a bridge to get to the mainland, and that's where the bigger part of the city is. After standing at my mailbox for what felt like too long, I forced myself to walk up the driveway and to get to my front door. I would have to pass him and his car. I remember gripping my backpack straps the closer I got. And I had tried my best not to look over towards his apartment and the car and him, but now I was close enough to hear him, and I was freaking out on the inside. He was talking to someone, but his voice was shaking and scared, and he was telling whoever it was to just hurry up. And something along the lines of, "You gotta help me, please." And the whole thing sent shivers up my spine and compelled me to turn my head in that direction. He had his back to me and was still on the phone, thank God. But what I saw that day still freaks me out to this day. In the passenger seat of his car was a rug. A dirty, old, dark-stained rug that was almost too fat to be a rug, and because it had slumped over forwards, I could see something down the inside of it, all rolled up. It would probably be smart to mention now, at the time, I refused to wear my glasses because my vision wasn't that bad, and I could still see pretty much everything. I'm blind as a bat without them now, and it was this that made me actually want to wear them. So, I see this rug, and what I'm almost 100% sure is a head of human hair in the roll at the top. And the longer I'm looking at it, the more and more I'm starting to think it's not really the shape of a rolled-up rug either. And now I'm really panicking. My dad was, and still is, addicted to HBO, and I'd spent most of my childhood watching shit like The Sopranos, and crazy movies that weren't appropriate for kids, let alone little girls. And in my head I'm thinking that this is some movie shit, and I'm trying to convince myself it's not real, but it isn't working. My neighbor had gone inside his garage and hadn't noticed me, so I bolted inside. I really don't even know if I slammed the door or if he heard it or what. I just remember throwing my skill stuff on the floor and running around to make sure all the doors were locked. We have a couch pushed up against the wall, so that it sits beneath the front window in the living room. It's the main window of the apartment, basically. The front door is right next to it, so I planted myself there, leaning on it and peeking out the window from between the blinds to see just exactly what my neighbor planned on doing, with what I'm convinced was a dead body. You may be thinking, hey, you're a 13-year-old girl home alone who might be witnessing a murder. Why don't you call the police? Police officers in my area are kind of notorious for being douchebags, and at 13, I'd already had my fair share of experiences with them that had not gone nicely. Plus, I knew this was all speculation, and if my mom found out I had brought a bunch of cops to the house without it being a real emergency, she would have killed me. Figuratively. So instead, I called my mom. She didn't shut my theory down right away, but by this time, I'm shaking because I have no idea what to do, and I'm just helpless as I'm telling her everything I've seen so far. She explains that there's a patient at her office, and she has to go, but she'll call back as soon as she can. Of course, just a few minutes after hanging up with her, neighbor man appears from his garage in a rush, and as he goes to open the passenger door, a white pickup truck I've never seen before creeps up slowly into my driveway. They pull up in front of the garage door for the unoccupied unit, so the truck is sort of blocked by the neighbor's car. But I can see that two middle-aged men, kinda scruffy, redneck-looking types with baseball bats and beards, get out of the small truck and start to help my neighbor maneuver the rug out of the seat. And it looks heavy as fuck. All three of them are straining to get the rug over and into the bed of the truck. And all those hours watching murder shows and whatnot with my dad have my mind going 1,000,000 miles a minute, picking out evidentiary things that were obvious to me, a 13-year-old with a Florida public school education. Like that dead bodies weigh a shit ton more than regular live bodies do. And that it really doesn't take long for rigor to set in. Let me tell you, that rug wasn't laying flat like a regular rug would. I had been to the flea market to pick out the new rug in the living room only a few months before this, so I had a damn good idea of what it was supposed to look like. It didn't. By now it's been about 30 minutes since I got inside the house, 20 since they pulled up and started this whole ordeal. And as quickly as they came, the guys in the white pickup truck threw a blue tarp over the rug in the back and started to leave. I tried my best to make out their license plate, but with no glasses on and my driveway being too damn long, I couldn't see it clearly. My neighbor started up his car and did a K-turn in the driveway so he could pull straight into his garage, and by then, my mom had called back and was insisting there was nothing I could do about it, and to calm down so we could talk about it when she got home a few hours later. From that point on, I kept my eyes on my neighbor like a hawk. There was a lot of, I guess you could call them, cleaning noises coming from his garage in the following days. You know, like vacuum sounds and scrubbing sounds. It's only about 10 feet away to his door in the garage, so I could hear them whenever I opened my front door. And yes, my neighbor still lives next door. Luckily, there's never been another instance like this one again. However, the next time my mom talked to him, I made a comment like, "Oh, Mike, the neighbor guy from next door, right?" Just to know if we were talking about the same person, and she said, "Yeah, the guy in number 2. "Of course," I'd nodded. And she'd given me this weird look like, "He just told me his name was Phil." To this day, I have never seen that white truck or the man inside of it ever again. Neighbor guy Mike, or Phil, or whatever his real name is, still has the same car parked in his garage. It never moves. I don't think it runs anymore. Whenever he has to go somewhere, either he's on that damn bike, or his son comes to pick him up and beeps in the driveway, making my dog bark. Every damn time. I honestly have no clue if my neighbor is a murderer or not. I do know that I've always found it strange he told my mom a different name. My dad swore up and down that he told him his name was Mike too, but to this day, he still goes by Phil and he's still my neighbor. A pretty decent one too. I mean, the guy might be late in his rent every month, but hey, he does all the landscaping, and just a few days ago, got the critters out of the soffits. So, guy in the white truck that disposed of a dead body for my neighbor? Let's not meet ever, please. And neighbor guy? I really hope you never read this. Hey everyone, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 3 True Scary Stories, episode 168. I'm kinda hoping that maybe that last story was just a misunderstanding, but given everything we were told, really doesn't look like it, does it? But hey, at least the guy keeps the gardens tidy for everyone. I don't want to think what he might be using as fertilizer, but at least he keeps the gardens tidy. Thanks of course go to everyone who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Okay, you'll get this on Sunday, won't you? I've still got Monday's video to do, so I'm gonna head off and try and get that finished, while I've still got energy to do it because I'm feeling quite drained right now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.